today, and round of applause for Dr. Mark. He did a fabulous job setting the tone for today, and I hope you all found it very interesting. We're excited to welcome you to the Intersectional Approaches to Fostering Wellbeing and Care, and Kelly and I will be co-hosting this event and are grateful for our panelists that are joining us today. Kelly, did you want to share a little bit more context before I introduce our panelists?
Sure, happy to. Thank you so much, Consuelo. This is Kelly speaking. So as you reviewed the program, you know that there are a lot of different topics you could be at. So we're really excited to have you with us. When we, as a committee, a subcommittee, started thinking about topics that were meaningful to the work that we do, myself and Consuelo, and also want to give us a shout out to Steve Cisneros, who is unable to be with us today, but helped to organize this session. We thought about the importance of uniting our praxis around well-being and care within our first generation community, and asking some critical questions about how we care for ourselves, how we care for our community. And so that really inspired us bringing together this wonderful group of panelists. We also want to note that when we were talking as a committee, it was really inspiring for us to think about our own stories as data. And this is one of the ways that we are able to, especially thinking about the intersectionality of our first gen community, our stories are knowledge bodies, right? They are knowledge bodies around our experience, our practices, and the ways that we think about how we can integrate well-being and care into our experiences and kind of foster well-being and care practices for our first gen community. So as we move through our stories today, we are really excited to share more and hear from you all about what care and well-being practices are meaningful to you as well. We're going to hear from all of our panelists, and Consuelo will begin that process in a moment, but we will also have some time for questions at the end. So want to encourage you as we move through our content today to feel free to jot down any questions that you want to bring up or share during our Q&A segment of our time together today.
All right. So thank you to our panelists. Again, this is Consuelo speaking, and I use she, pronouns. I'm a first generation college student myself, and first in my family to also go to get a graduate degree as well. I've been in higher ed for over 10 plus years, and have really found my fit here in this space in helping students navigate this space we call college, higher education, and can relate to many of the feelings and emotions and that our college students face today, and in some ways are being more challenged, I think, than maybe I had it while I was going through college. And so know that the staff and the faculty that we surround ourselves with can be a real source of support. And one of the things that I found very fortunate about the U is the openness and willingness of all staff and faculty to just like lend an open hand to help, and are genuinely concerned about students and their well-being as they navigate this journey. So I'd like to just introduce our panelists by name, and then I will let them introduce themselves more formally. But I want to welcome Jessica Cameron, who's the Assistant Director for the President's Emerging Scholars Program, Carly Duran Marrero, who's a Graduate Assistant within President's Emerging Scholars Program, Asavari Manvikar, who is a graduate faculty in the Center for Spirituality and Healing, Kelly McPhail, academic technologist within the Center for Spirituality and Healing, and last but not least, Nina Hernandez Bethon, who is our diversity liaison counselor within Student Counseling Services. And so let's start off by welcoming Carly, looking at Kelly, Carly, to unmute yourself and please share a little bit about who you are.
Hello. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. Okay. I didn't realize I'm wearing the same sweater as my shirt, so that's amazing. Hopefully you can identify me more easily. My name is Carly Jan Marrero. Thank you for the introduction and thank you for this space. I am in my second year of my master's in higher education here at the University of Minnesota, and I'm also an alum of the University of Minnesota. I got my bachelor's in individualized studies, and so focusing in on gender, women, and sexuality studies, family and social science, art, and then I got a minor in leadership. But I know for certain that the President's Emerging Scholars Program is a foundational place for first-gen students. And so it's a gift and an honor to be in space with you all today.
Thank you, Carly. Now, Nina, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Consuelo. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nina Hernandez-Python. I use she, her pronouns. I'm in a different sweater today, but it's actually the same one, but this is striped. Like we always need to buy multiple when we find something cozy. So it's great here to be here with you all. As Consuelo said, I work at Student Counseling Services as the Diversity Liaison Counselor. I've been here in that role for about 5.5 years. And I work doing individual group counseling support. And I also coordinate a few of our programs that are really have been well utilized by first-gen students. And so excited to talk more about those as we go on through the panel. I am also an alum from here. So I graduated with my master's degree in social work. And in my undergrad, I went to Bethel University. You can see kind of some of my previous experience, some of the identities that I hold here. I think important to name in this space that I'm not a first-gen student. So both of my parents were college educated. My dad is actually a professor. And so my mom was a first-generation student. So I kind of come from it of this understanding of what it was like to see my mom go through, and then also having my dad would actually take me to class and I would read in class with his students. And so I have kind of this like interesting like growing up around higher ed and really have a love for higher ed and for accessibility for all of our students. We were asked about favorite self-care resources and I was like, this is honestly what I do. I don't know. I was like, it's not the best, but these are my favorite things to do and they like really work for me. So I don't know, TikTok consistently just sees me and acknowledges me, affirms me who I am. And so I learn a lot on there and it feels really affirming. I love a good audio message. My thumbs got tired. And so, yeah, I'm always here for an audio message. It's great for driving. And then I'm a danzante, so I'm part of a Mexica Azteca danza community here. We just held ceremony for Day of the Dead, and that's been something that gives me a lot of life. And then paletas, anyone, if you don't know about it, Michoacana, Purepecha on the east side. Maybe you have your own favorite spots, but please go there with a quickness for some self-care. It is delicious. So great to be here with you all today.
Jessica, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Consuelo. Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be here with you all today. Jessica, she, her pronouns, and currently I'm the assistant director with the PES program. I've actually worked here at the university since 2015-ish in some different capacities. So I took 1.5 year hiatus away, and I'm really excited to be back with the PES team. I also am a certified facilitator for a program called the Mental Health First Aid Program. So you can actually Google that if you're interested, but mental health and well-being is something that I'm really passionate about. And I identify as someone who lives with generalized anxiety, who identifies as a storyteller, as a plant lover, as a dog mom, as a creator. And so I'm really excited to be here today to talk through wellness with you all.
Kelly.
Hi, everyone. As we've been thinking about all of our identities today, you might see that my name in the chat. I'm billing myself as Kelly Wakely McPhail because she, her pronouns. But as Kelly Wakely, I earned my bachelor's from CLA and my master's from CEHD. So it's important to acknowledge that part of myself today, as I've been in community with so many other fellow first generation college students. And yeah, I've been reflecting on that, and it just feels like that was like what was really missing from my experience being a first generation college student and being a transfer student to the university is you can really go through it and not have those communities that just really are game changers. So it's been incredible to connect and be part of this group. So I digress. I work at the Bakken Center for Spirituality and Healing, and I am the director of the Learning Resources Group. So I provide technology support and academic technology and instructional design services to our cadre of faculty that teach our academic courses. I've got a whole slew of self-care resources. A lot of them are from the Bakken Center. So I'll be, talking through some of those later, but I guess for self-care, I just really rely on getting up in the morning and getting it in, but before everybody else gets up in my house. So I rely a lot on just streaming on demand, exercise, nutrition, and meditation and yoga. And we love hiking as a family. And I shared Minnesota and Wisconsin state park systems information, as well as a thing called Roots Rated that helps you find awesome hikes all around you. So that's what I have. Thanks, everyone.
And last but not least, Asavari.
Hello, good morning, everyone. It's so nice to meet you all. Shall I share my screen?
I am so sorry. I had a little tech hiccup. Please introduce yourself and I will pull that up for you. So sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. All right. So I'm Asavari Manvikar. I did my master's in Ayurvedic medicine from India. So originally I'm from India. And I'm not a first generation student because both my parents, they are actually masters in their education and they have been teaching. So both of them, they are professors. But definitely I am a first generation immigrant. So everything is new here when I came to the United States. And I see both of my kids, they are the first generation, they are taking education here. So the education system is very different than how it was back in India. And the culture is very different. And that's how I'm seeing, trying to find out what are the similarities, what are the differences. And it is really lovely to go through this journey. So a little bit about myself. Thank you. So I'm a part of Center for Spirituality and Healing past 12 years, and it has been a wonderful journey, bringing all the information, the wisdom about health, what Ayurveda, the ancient system of health from India, brings. So it is really lovely to bring it to everybody here in the US as well as to the students. What I really love is, what I'm really passionate is about Ayurveda and yoga, how they connect the mind, body, and spirit, and how these things we can bring in our everyday life for the self-realization as well as for self-healing. And as a part of the community, how can we bring all of these things in the when we interact with each other. So bringing that, community aspect and also healing from there, and creating really safe place and supporting each other. So I'm very happy to be here to share my opinion and my journey with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you to all our panelists for your introductions. I, for one, have appreciated learning more about just the different resources and how people approach their own self-care. And am excited to use that hike link that Kelly shared. As an outdoors person, I do find that that is a good way for me to relieve stress and take care of my own physical and mental well-being. So thank you for sharing all of those resources for your own self-care, and encourage all of us to kind of think about those innovative ways that we approach care for ourselves and how we share that with one another. So in preparation for this conversation, we asked our panelists to think a little bit about their own identities and experiences in navigating both kind of their own higher education experiences as students, but then also as staff right now in terms of working with current college students, and thinking a little bit about the ways in which we work with first-gen students and the first-gen community here in the context of health and well-being. And so I'd invite, maybe we'll just go back kind of in a circle and start again with Nina. And if you could answer that question, how have your identities and experiences influenced the way that you work with first-gen students and first-gen community in the context of health and well-being?
Yeah, great. Thanks for the question. So I think a few things that kind of come to mind to me. And so I think, as I shared earlier, I'm not a first-generation student, so I do hold some overlapping like marginalized identities that many folks from marginalized communities might also hold. So being a mixed person, a queer person, and then really holding a lot of importance around family and spirituality. And so I think part of what I have really worked to do in my time here has been to be in community with different folks who are working with students directly. I think there's really a realization that mental health services, especially formalized ones, are sometimes not seen as a good option for many people in community. People might have had negative experiences in mental health before, or they also might have some ideas of like, oh, I don't know that my situation is actually bad enough in order to go and seek out mental health support. And so part of what my work has done, especially given my own identities that I hold, has been to be in partnership with different offices and be able to actually go out to where the students are, to be able to bring well-being, health, and wellness support out into community. And to really try to diversify the way that we can offer mental health support to students. So some of kind of like the ways that that has looked has been through the bringing of a program called Let's Talk here to university. Gina was one of my coworkers at the time. She found the program that's originally created by Cornell. And essentially it's a really informal drop-in consultation support where students are able to come and to get support on a one-time basis with really minimal paperwork. And they're also able to pick which counselor they want to meet with. And so a lot of times it's helpful for folks to have a match with their counselor, whether that's similar life experiences, similar identities. And so that's been a really helpful resource for a lot of students. We've seen, I'm one of the counselors in the program, we've seen a lot of first-gen students come in and say like, I didn't really know what this was going to be like. I wasn't sure this was going to be like a fit for me, but I'm open to trying it. And many times folks are like, okay, I think counseling could be helpful. And so then we work to get them supported with further mental health support. I think another piece that I'll just name too is some of our own internal policies within SES, student counseling services. We really noticed that oftentimes students who maybe have who are highly resourced, who have an experience, but their family members have been in counseling, or who have been to the university before and been in college education, will be our first ones in the door, like August, like 25th. They're like, hello, like I'm here and I need counseling support. And unfortunately, we don't have as many counselors as we would love to have to be able to see all of our students that are seeking services. So what happened was oftentimes first-gen students with other marginalized identities would come into counseling. They would hear about it later in the semester, and then we would be full, or we would have really long waiting lists. And so internally, we've done a lot of work to think about how can we really prioritize access for students who don't have other resources, who maybe aren't able to go through insurance for mental health support. And that's been a really important piece. And I've seen my role as someone who's on our diversity and equity committee to be able to help really facilitate that process and work that kind of through the system and approvals. And it's been really lovely to see like the whole community of SES really support that idea and rally behind that, wanting to provide access to students who historically maybe would have been hesitant to come in. Yeah, so those are a few of the pieces that I'll name for now.
Thank you, Nina. Carly, what would you add to the kind of the conversation in terms of thinking about your identity and interactions with students from a well-being perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Consuelo and Nina. I mean, Let's Talk is so foundational to a lot of what we provide or what we refer to students, right? So as a queer, both mixed race, but also mixed cultural identity, my mother was adopted. And so like the contrast of what adoption can look like in terms of racial and ethnic identity development feels really important, especially as it pertains to first-gen students and some of the realities that our students face. But also then, being an alum of the university, being a femme, being a caretaker, being a storyteller, being a person who is highly collectivist as well because of my cultural background. All of those pieces take part in how I support my students. I think that a lot of, the really deep commitments to intentional partnerships across the university seem to support students in really effective ways, right? Having trusted alliances and liaisons that serve our first-gen students specifically, but also those of ethnic and racial, minority background. I would say additionally, I think really focusing in on my role as caretaker and coming into how that looks cross-generationally, right? Like within higher ed, but also being close in age to many of my students has an impact, right? I went right straight through from my undergrad to my grad program. And so there's a lot of familiar faces that I get to engage in a very nuanced, still culturally hip, right, kind of way that really, I think, feeds and nurtures some of the trust that I've been able to develop across the years, and just some of the holding of the crises that have been going on, some of the really like deep loss and mourning that we've been going through as a result of the pandemic. So yeah, I think my feminist and my queerness, as well as my brownness, all of those things allow me access to students that I don't think I would have access otherwise.
Thank you, Carly. That is, I appreciate both of you in sharing, the reason we started with this particular question is like our identities do influence the ways in which we interact and think about programming and can relate to students. And so definitely, thank you both for sharing that. And Kelly, we'd love to hear more about kind of your intersecting identities and how that shapes the work that you do in interacting with students from a well-being perspective.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. There we go. So yeah, I think there's just a variety of the identities that I have that, influence the way that I approach my work. Being a first generation student as well as an alum, I talked about, my experiences being a transfer student as an undergrad. Prior to my work at the Bakken Center, I was a K-12 educator. I taught high school level digital and media arts for 12 years and worked with a lot of other students who would be going on to being first-gen students in their own families. Yeah, I have all of those pieces, and then there's also some other things that have to be acknowledged about being, you know, female, white, cisgender, heterosexual, able-bodied, neurotypical. Anyway, the work that I do at the Bakken Center, yeah, I'm supporting faculty, so I'm helping faculty help students, and then I'm also helping faculty. You know, it gets really circular, right? But I think the thing that's in common there is that what I'm doing for faculty, which then also influences for students, is you know, I'm helping to curate and navigate and create connection and just reduce the cognitive load or the overwhelm that can come with, you know, being in a large institution like this. And especially working in a smaller unit, we have a lot of faculty who are, you know, working in the field, and then they maybe just teach like one course at the university once a year. We don't really have tenure track faculty, so it can be kind of like re-entering the university all over again every year. So really, I'm enacting care and well-being in the context of the classroom by helping instructors implement student-centered practices that are reducing barriers and increasing transparency and accessibility for students. And, you know, one thing that we really uphold within our unit are the goals, practices, and strategies that are associated with something that we call the Wellbeing Enhances Learning, or WELL model. I'm going to put a link to that in the chat. So it's just z.umn.edu/WEL model. So the WELL model is really unique. It originally actually it was created organically with faculty prior to you know, when I started working at the center. And it just recommends you know, practices that promote student and support student well-being across like 6 different dimensions. Like, we're thinking about whole person well-being. The Bakken Center has a model of well-being that thinks about 6 dimensions: health, relationships, security, purpose, community, and environment. So another piece that I think is really important to talk about with the WELL model is that during 2020 and 2021, we also reviewed and updated the WELL model to you know, further reflect universal design for learning principles and anti-racist pedagogy. Yeah, so that's all coming together. You know, just bringing resources that promote well-being, and then also just baking it into like our course syllabi and our Canvas templates, and just promoting recommended practices within instruction, like, you know, flexible deadlines, you know, clear expectations and rubrics and assessment, the opportunity for mastery learning. That's really how I'm bringing it together. Like, I always call ourselves like the wind beneath everybody's wings, just helping drive everything forward to promote success and well-being for faculty and for students. We really believe in the reciprocal relationship between that. So I think that's really, in a nutshell, what we have going on.
And Asavari, can you build a little bit on that as a colleague to Kelly in the Center for Spirituality and Healing? What are the additional support and resources, and how your work has framed well-being, and particularly thinking about our first-gen students?
Thank you, everybody. So I will echo, you know, everything that Kelly talked about. Being at the Center for Spirituality last 12 years, I have seen the well-being model is becoming more and more superfined. So there is so much more information and really, really wonderful modules, lovely courses which are being offered at the center. And if you look at the website, there are so many self-care things that you can do, and you can just navigate through all of these areas in order to understand how those things can be useful to you. So at the center, as like my role is to teach Ayurvedic medicine. So Ayurveda is a holistic medicine that really works around like body, mind, and spirit. And what I really like to do with my students to make sure that they feel safe in the class and they can communicate with each other. So I teach mostly the online course now, and what I see that students become a lot more, comfortable when there are online discussions because they can bring forward whatever concepts or whatever things they feel, and there is a lot of richness to the conversations that take place. In-person courses, definitely they have their own, positivity, and online courses have a little bit different to offer. But overall, what I see, the most important aspect is to look at your self-care and try to make sure that you are taking care of yourself on a day-to-day basis. So creating really good routine, that's what I can say for, everybody who are the first generation students, because they are going through so many different changes and challenges. They come from a different environment and they are getting into a different environment. Sometimes it can be related to the culture. Sometimes it can be related to the languages they are speaking at home and the languages they are, learning at the school. And that's how they need to be open for, there needs to be curiosity and also openness and acceptance so that it can build a lot of possibilities. They can navigate and, get into these new horizons to learn, and definitely supporting each other, because when it is a community building in the class, that helps a lot for learning. So each student can bring, like everybody has their own backgrounds, different backgrounds, so they can bring more from their backgrounds and they can pull that information and wisdom and share that with everybody, like all the class. So that's what I try to encourage in all my classes. I feel it's really important to learn from each other, from your experiences, as well as, definitely the books are there, but it's more about like, how can you help heal yourself, like physically, mentally, and emotionally, and create kind of bond in the class.
I think that's a nice tie into some of the work that Jessica's been doing in terms of like her personal interests too around mental health first aid, and some of the work that she's been doing too within kind of the President's Emerging Scholars Program and working with our leaders and mentors in that space. Jessica, will you share a little bit about kind of your work, kind of in a more student-facing context, and the resources that you engage students with?
Gladly. Thank you, Consuelo. So I definitely think my identities, and some that I left out from my introduction, is that I do identify as first gen, as well as I was an out-of-state student. And so when working with first generation college students today, the reality that social identity impacts the way we navigate the world, the way we navigate education, I advocate for and encourage students to understand that. Because a lot of the times when you understand that, it can be relieving, and an aid in your well-being. And so another mission of mine is to help students understand the impact of social identities on their well-being and their mental health. And so that connects to the mental health first aid program that I facilitate trainings for, and have had the honor to work with our President's Emerging Scholars mentors and our staff, because the program is not only good for students, is helpful for us to support each other as well. But in that training, we talk about destigmatizing mental health in general. Mental health crises are normal and a part of everyday life. And so normalizing that, I think, really supports first generation college students as my colleagues have already alluded to, are doing and going through a lot with the transition into higher ed. So I encourage establishing an understanding of how much wellness and mental health intersect with education. And so that's part of the work that I do with the 6-hour training that the mental health first aid curriculum is. And in addition to that, being able to aid people when they may be in a moment of crisis or increasing or having some signs and symptoms of a crisis.
Thank you, Jessica. And thank you for everybody answering that kind of initial question and starting to weave in the resources as well as kind of your approaches to working with students inside and outside of the classroom. And one of the things in constructing kind of this panel and bringing in the variety of experiences that we have here today is that we were intentional in who we brought in and thinking about who's supporting students kind of in the direct support kind of ways and engaging through different programming opportunities like PES, but also in kind of the care role of a counselor and the support services that a student counseling services provides. And then on the other end, as well as how do we effectively as educators open up those spaces within the classroom and how important that is to provide that space. And so we get a broad range because we know all of us are working with students in a different context. We realize that in this space, we'll have educators who are instructors, professors, working to integrate these types of topics and issues and conversations into the classroom and are looking for practical experiences in how to do that. But then also we have staff members who are on the day-to-day having sometimes pretty significant conversations with students. And so trying to provide space for all of that in one short session is challenging. So I appreciate that the panelists have been able to navigate and share some of that experiences.
You're muted, Consuelo.
Oops. Thank you. I hope I wasn't muted for very long. I must have inadvertently hit the space bar. So I was going to ask Nina, how and maybe even like folks from the President's Emerging Scholars Programs, how have you interacted in kind of that support for faculty, instructors, in providing some resources or maybe engaging students in conversations in the classroom?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. And then, yeah, Carly and Jessica too. I think so part of what we're able to do is provide consultations to staff and faculty who might have concerns about a student. Like I was sharing earlier, there's a lot of times where students don't necessarily come through our doors, but they will talk to a trusted faculty member or staff person that they already have a relationship with. And so part of the work that we do can look like supporting those staff and faculty around how can we have conversations with students first around just like checking in, providing empathy and support, and then potentially discussing like referrals if that's ever something the student would be open to. I think that mental health can be, it's a very like hot topic right now, but it's also something that can be intimidating for folks. Like they want to say the quote unquote right thing. They're worried about leading people astray. And so a lot of the training and support we do is really just encouraging staff and faculty to lean in with boundaries and to have those conversations, but to then also know like, okay, this is something that is beyond my role, beyond my scope of what I'm able to provide support around. Part of what that resource referral work will look like then is educating the campus community on like such a huge broad range of resources. Our colleagues here from the Center for Spirituality, if maybe someone's more comfortable taking a class than going to counseling, great, like do that, that's perfect. Being able to offer up affinity group spaces, so people who are holding similar identities, whether racially, around sexual orientation, being able to come together in community and recognizing like healing can take place in a lot of different ways. And then really having folks have an understanding of there is access to mental health support on campus for you. There's online options, there's casual, there's ongoing, like you get to choose what's going to feel good for you. I think that can be a really helpful conversation for staff and faculty to have with their students to see like what is going to feel helpful and something that you're open to doing. When I first started this position, that was really designed to serve as a liaison role and to be able to have that transfer of trust. And so I also am able to take direct referrals for people who are like, oh, I know Nina, like maybe you're hesitant to go through the formal process, but I can email you, she'll email you back, and you'll find a time to get started. And so that's been another way that I've been able to provide support to staff and faculty. Many of our counselors on staff have liaison relationships with different units. And so we all get those emails of like, okay, here's someone who's not willing to fill out paperwork, but they will email you back. And it's like, okay, great, let's start there. It doesn't need to be, we don't bill insurance, so it doesn't need to be in this formal way, but we want to just be able to provide support to students. And so I think one of the things that I'll also talk about with staff and faculty is around flexibility, accommodations. And really, I think, Jessica, I appreciated what you said around like, what are the systems and structures in place, and like, where is like that actually where the problem is lying versus like with individual folks. And so encouraging staff and faculty to think about their syllabus, the way that they provide support. When are high stake tests and assignments like really necessary, and like usually they're not. And so it's like, how can we really engage and lean into that more universal design so that all of our students are able to get the support that they need and be able to have conversations. I think for me, as someone who kind of lives in between a lot of different spaces, I have some of that understanding of like, here's the ways that I've been taught to advocate for myself, the privileges that I hold in some of my identities. And I also have been able to kind of make that legible for other people who hold more privileged identities, to say like, oh, like this doesn't just happen in this like automatic way. Like there's ways that we need to be really explicit and talk about this with our students, to say like, you can actually approach me, I do want to work with you. And so that's something that I really work to do as I'm supporting fellow staff and faculty.
Thank you. I'm looking at, we would like to offer some time for you all as the audience members to ask our panelists some questions. So I'm going to turn it over to you all. You feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question, or you can type it into the chat, and I will make sure I relay that to our panelists. I will say as well, many of the resources and more are in the slides, and I believe that Kelly's shared the slide deck earlier. I just shared it again, so if you missed that, they are in the slide deck as well, but wanted to make sure that everybody had access to that. Question. We have a question from Holly. What kinds of programming should offices across campus be thinking about to invite first-gen students into their spaces and offer opportunities for wellness?
Can I ask for context and what type of office? Like, is it a department or like a student office?
Career services. I think that's a really good question.
Could I add to this one maybe? Yeah. So I was thinking about this morning as I was, walking in, and I think that there's a really exciting moment happening around re-understanding and relearning what career looks like and what kind of the work ethic that many of our first gen students have, right? And so engaging in opportunities around wellness and really clear conversations around capacity, longevity, time management, and self-love almost, right? Like I want to add that, right? Like these moments of you all, I guess this is more messaging, right, around what could exist in the content, but the first gen students that I'm seeing, in the last 2 years specifically are really feeling behind, right? And so a lot of what feels important is to ask always to relearn and unlearn kind of these work ethic, these extractive work ethics that these students come from, because, our parents, our caretakers, our guardians are still working with their bodies, right? And so we're in a totally different world. So I guess in terms of career services, really asking, what is the intention of this labor, and what do you hope for it to be? What feels long-term, what feels possible, and moving from scarcity mindsets to frameworks of abundance, which I think specifically for our first-gen students, specifically for, our minoritized, racial, ethnic students, our immigrant students, our refugee students, like these are our food insecure students, especially, right? Like all these moments. I think career services could be a really powerful platform for kind of this unlearning. Yeah.
Thank you, Carly. I love to add to that. Something that popped into my mind is unpacking the systems that exist in your areas. So when I think about career services, I think about my affinity for etiquette dinners, but really unpacking what that means, right? Because when you're thinking about an etiquette, whose etiquette, and how do you teach that in an asset-based manner? So how do you invite people into that space by naming what you're teaching, why you're teaching it, and what that means for them as a tool? And so I think all offices, we exist in higher education, enforcing or upholding systems or processes that have been harmful to some others, right? And whoever that other is. So I think being more honest and upfront about having conversations about that authentically, I think would bring in a completely new and engaged and excited audience. I think about if I saw an etiquette dinner, or if I saw graduating after college, and really talking about, how does that impact, how does that intersect with first gen and code switching and, things that are real to me, like I would have been there, instead of just the plain faced, what's next steps, very vague, very cookie cutter, but really thinking about what students really want and need to hear, and I'm helping them unpack.
Awesome. We have one question. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Hayda Cleveland, and I work at the Carlson School of Management. And my question for you, because our building is physically so far away from the rest of the campus, and our students come to classes in our buildings for most of the day and aren't able to sometimes engage with the rest of campus. We're trying to do a lot of work around supporting our students and not duplicating what already exists, but being able to create some sort of a branch at the Carlson School so that our students are supported. And so can you talk a little bit about the importance of having a physical actual space as it relates to wellness for our students? It has been a fight that I've been fighting for the last 2 years, and it's not going very far. So can you just talk a little bit about that? Because we're able to provide things temporary, right, when we do events and programming, but what happens when we're not there? And so, yeah, I would love some insight from our panelists.
Yeah, I feel like I could maybe say something about that. As you had a concern about duplicating, like not wanting to be redundant to things, and maybe something that you could consider is, rather than being concerned about duplication, you can consider how it's about, personalizing to the context and needs of Carlson students. Like, because there's just a huge array of resources, and a lot of times it's just kind of filtering it and bringing it to your student population in a way that it's going to feel like more resonant or meaningful or specific to them. That's something that we try to do at the Bakken Center for our students and faculty. It's just that curate and personalization, and that really does go a long way. One other thing that I can share in the chat today is I compiled a list of Bakken Center resources that you or anybody can think about using within your own context to promote well-being in your spheres.
Hey, I really appreciate you for bringing that question into the space, because I know that this is a struggle for many across campus, especially who are serving historically underrepresented students. And so this summer, during the Emerge Summer STEM program, we had the privilege to work with Michael Winkoff. He works in our science communication lab on campus. And we actually took students who were here this summer into different spaces on campus to have them reflect about how they felt in those spaces. So if you imagine a first gen or immigrant student or BIPOC student going into, I don't know, an atrium, a chemistry lecture room, I'm sure you all can probably think about the feelings that those students may have written. We also were very intentional with continuing to use the same space over and over for study halls, because we know that those students defaulted to those spaces for the familiarity. They started building community and familiarity with that space. And so when they're, like you said, when you're not here, they do still have a place of comfort. So I wonder how powerful it could be to include students' stories of reflection and how they feel in Carlson spaces and or different places on campus, and reflect on, and maybe ask them a question alluding to what would your space look like if you could envision that. Another piece that we were able to do during Emerge was we named, and this is kind of connected to the story I just shared, but I personally shared how in Kaufman, or the Memorial Union, is triggering for me because we only have pictures of old white people. And it's just like a constant reminder to me of like the access that my ancestors had and that weren't a part of, right? So it's almost like constant microaggressions all the time. And so I think it would be really powerful to bring in voices to that, that ask. And I think that the students would support that, but I think that would be a very powerful piece to include, because not any of our students said anything warm about the spaces on campus outside of their spaces, like MK and like PES Lounge. And so that's what I would recommend.
This is Kelly speaking. Love that. Thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you, Gaeta, for an incredibly powerful question. I wanted to know, we are over time. We've shared in the chat our program link. We want to thank you so much for our wonderful, amazing panelists, and for those of you that attended our session. On behalf of all of us, I know we truly appreciate it. So we're going to have a break now for the next 5 minutes if you need to run to your next session, and you can refer to that program to see where you're going next. Thank you so much for being here, and we wish you all well. Take good care.